Breaking knuckles up here. All right. Thank you. Hello. Good morning. That's not very helpful, Ms. Chapman. It sounds like a mouse around the house. Thump it? That's a little better. Okay. All right. If we can get the gallery settled down a little bit and then the members settled down a little bit, we'll start a meeting. Oh, I doubt that, but welcome again. I don't know if you're happy to be here or tired of being here, but either way, we welcome you and thank you for participating in this 2500 DOT modernization meeting. How many meetings have we had, Mills? Maybe? I don't know. 10? Yeah? 70,000 according to Emma. A lot of them, and we appreciate it because we've had so much input. These are our discussion and subcommittee meetings. This is the second one, Future Needs Subcommittee. I will ask the folks on our committee to introduce themselves in just a second, but want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Any information that you haven't shared, that you feel the need to share, any specific language that you need to share with the committee needs to be sent in by Friday. And our email address is schouseepw@schhouse.gov. Please make sure that you or any of our members send in that information because the staff will be working on finalizing what this whole plan looks like. And it's really important, especially if you have specific language in a specific section that you would like to be considered and have in the bill. That being my only housekeeping note, I believe. Representative Crawford, anything else I need to say in the beginning? All right, Lynn Shannon Erickson, House District 124, co-chairing the committee and chair of House Education and Public Works. Thanks for being here. Your turn.
Heather Crawford, District 68, Southern Horry County, Myrtle Beach, Greater Socastee area.
Don Chapman, District 8, Anderson County.
David Vaughn, District 27, Greenville County.
Good morning, everyone. Leon Stavernakis, Charleston County, District 119, which is West Ashley, Johns Island, and James Island.
Good morning, Gary Brewer, House District 114, Charleston and Dorchester counties in the good part of West Ashley.
Cody Mitchell, House District 65, Darlington, Chesterfield, Kershaw, and Lancaster counties.
Thank you. That's our committee members. Now, the other members who are sitting in with us today, would you like to introduce yourselves?
David Martin, District 26, that's the east side of Fort Mill.
Philip Bowers, Pickens County, Clemson Central 6 Mile area. Glad to be visiting with you today.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Smith, House District 99, Berkeley County.
Good morning, everyone. Robbie Robbins, District 97, Dorchester and Colleton.
Thank you, everyone. As you can see, we have scanned the entire state of South Carolina with our membership from the top to the bottom and both sides, and have a very comprehensive group of representatives who have been diligent about their work during the entire off session, and I need to publicly thank them for all of that. Up for us first is none other than our Secretary of Transportation, Justin Powell, to give us a little bit of background on the future needs as the perspective of DOT, and then we will do Q&A and afterwards any discussion that the members may have. Good morning, Secretary Powell.
May just have to hold my finger here. That might get... So there we go. So well, thank you, Madam Chair, and for our 70,000th briefing on this. But what I wanted to do today is, with this committee's task or charge being focused on the future needs for the state highway system, what I wanted to do was spend a few minutes talking to y'all about our Momentum 2050 plan. So what I have is a presentation that went to our commission back in May when they adopted it. I want to put a couple of things in context in terms of how we do planning within the state, and I'll talk about this with the Revenue and Fiscal Committee, but we are required statutorily to do a series of plans through the course of things. And the first one is, which I'll be talking about, is our long-range multimodal transportation plan. So we are looking out basically 20, in this case, we would decide to look out 25 years to basically set the vision, the framework, and to identify a gap of what would be needed for us to achieve that vision. So we'll get into that at the end of how much funding would be necessary to continue to invest and achieve that vision. One of the things that we do once we have that document legislatively required, so we have to do an update on it every 5 years, we are also required to do what's known as an asset management plan, and that is basically a performance-based document. So when I talk about our 10-year plan, what I'm really talking about is our asset management plan, that if you give us X number of dollars, what in return will you get back from it? And so when we talk about the 10-year plan, we say if you put in this much money into payments, you get this much in condition. If you put this much into interstates, you get this back in return. And then the last kind of document is what's known as our statewide transportation improvement program, and that's really the projects that are being taken off of our priority lists and applied to the dollars that have been put into our asset management plan that we drive how we receive projects. So it's kind of an iterative process, but as we wrap up the 10-year plan, so we're in year 8 now, we'll be done in 2027 with that first 10-year plan. We'll be preparing for the second 10-year plan, but a first key step in that is for us to go through and identify what we need to deal with as a state. And so I wanted to share a few things with you. Mr. Rainwater, this is a dated version of his chart, but this is from the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office. I think one of the narratives that we all have to be appreciating is that the state's population growth has continued to accelerate and accelerate even faster really since the last census. So in the 2010 and 2020 censuses, we added about 500,000 people to South Carolina. We were the 10th fastest growing state in the country. Today, I have not seen the most recent census estimates, but we've been adding closer to 90,000 people a year. So we are already on track in the first 5 years, about added that as almost as many people as we've added in the prior censuses, and we expect that trend to continue. So our state's growth rate's going to accelerate. I've seen no sign of it abating. You know, there was a U-Haul report a few months ago saying we were the number 1, 2 for inbound moves. We are consistently one of the highest rate of growth, even in raw numbers, even compared to like a Texas and Florida. And it is, I think, we are well on our track to being over 6 million people, definitely by 2040, if not before then. So our growth rate continues to accelerate. And when you're dealing with continued population, Mr. Rainwater, I think, spent a lot of good time kind of highlighting that from his perspective. We are going to deal with just more traffic and more people on the roadways. And Mr. Rainwater kind of covered this as well yesterday, is that growth is not being evenly felt across the state of South Carolina. So what you're seeing is significant rates of growth happening in Charleston metro area, the Myrtle Beach metro area, the Beaufort Hilton Head area, a little bit here in the Columbia area, and then significant growth rates happening in Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson, Pickens, Oconee counties, and then growth in York and Lancaster counties, so the suburban counties of Charlotte, and we're starting to get indications that that's going to start creeping into Chesterfield County soon as well. So what we've seen is in our urban areas, particularly along the I-85 corridor and along the coast, we have seen an acceleration of our population growth. At the same time, what we have also seen in the state is we have seen our growth rates stagnate or go negative in counties like Allendale, in Bamberg, in Marion as well. So what we have is a dual challenge in South Carolina right now, where we have exponential rates of growth happening in our urban areas with stagnant or contracting rural counties as well. So that continues to be a challenge that shapes in how we think about our transportation needs as a state. So one of the things that we did as a result of Momentum 2050 is we did a public survey of the traffic, the concerns of the public in terms of what they thought. And we got 6,000 responses. We worked hard to make sure that there were responses from every corner of South Carolina in there. And what we heard overwhelmingly in terms of the response was that congestion and delay was the number one concern by nearly a 2/3 margin of our residents when we conducted that survey. Certainly outweighed road conditions, which still weighed heavily in terms of about 23%, but certainly was higher ranked than adding bike and ped amenities, transit, the bridge conditions, natural hazards. Really was the top theme we were hearing from folks was related to that congestion and delay that we're seeing, and it's showing up not only in those places where they are growing quickly, but also in those counties that are starting to feel the impacts of that, the Jaspers, the Edgefields, the Chesterfields, that are starting to see the Lawrence counties where they're starting to see additional growth as well. When you actually kind of try to measure it in terms of real terms, this is and Mr. Rainwater kind of put this up yesterday on a statewide basis, that the growth in the vehicles miles traveled. So how many miles are being driven on our roadways? And what we've seen is that basically the increase in vehicles miles traveled follows where the population has been growing the most. So you see it Greenville, Pickens, Spartanburg, on the 85 corridor. You see it along the coast. You do see it in some parts of the Midlands as well, but it follows that growth pattern, that people are driving on roughly the same miles of lane miles, but are driving more miles on it. So it is an indicator of increasing growth and congestion across our state as a reflection of the population growth that we've been having. So our Momentum 2050 plan was crafted with that kind of, and obviously many more data points, but those key data points that our path as up to this point has been very focused on overcoming deferred maintenance, that we are trying to catch up on 30 years of underinvestment in the system. So you see those priorities in our 10-year plan right now are focused on pavements, focused on bridge repairs and replacements. They're focused on safety, and we're doing some interstate work. We probably need to do more than what we're doing right now, but it's been focused on catching up on that backlog that we have across the state. What the Momentum 2050 plan starts saying is that we've got to not only continue to focus on catching up on the state of good repair and getting us towards the state of good repair, but we've got to be prepared for this influx that's happening across South Carolina in terms of the growth and congestion that we're having, as well as the rural challenge we're having where people are having to travel increasing distances to get to a job, to get to health care, to get to education in our rural communities as well. So there are 4 key emphasis areas of the Momentum 2050 plan. I know y'all have kind of shared this with y'all, but first and foremost, we've got to continue and not take away money from what we've already been putting into maintenance. We've made progress. We have started catching back up, but I'll be the first to say we have not caught back up, that we still have plenty of pavements that need to be repaved. We still have plenty of bridges that need to be replaced and rehabilitated. We still have a too high fatality rate across South Carolina, so we've got to bring that number down. Our second major area of emphasis, our state's economic growth in the past decade or so has been attributable to a number of things. One, a great workforce, a great quality of life, but also the infrastructure necessary to move major manufacturing and port activity through South Carolina. And so we've got to continue invest in our interstate system. So while we've been doing work on 26 and have started work on 95, we're working on Malfunction Junction. We've got some major needs across the state. We still have major corridors, rural corridors that have not been addressed and will likely not get addressed until at least 2035. We've got to finish up the work on Malfunction Junction, but we still have issues on I-85 in Greenville, and then 26 and 526 in the Charleston area are congested and severely constrained every single day in terms of just getting around. Getting around Charleston is increasingly a challenge, just like it's becoming an increasing challenge in Greenville to get between Greenville and Spartanburg. So we've got to continue to invest on our interstates and making investments in capacity and making investments so that we can put more throughput there, because the port has continued to grow. We continue to get large manufacturing facilities that are going to be necessary to move freight, as well as just the continued population of the state. When the interstate system was built in South Carolina, we had about half as many people as we do today. So just to move what we need to move around is important. Third major area of emphasis we need to think about is this challenge of urban and rural mobility. And we've historically focused this through our metropolitan planning organizations and our councils of governments, but we've got a dual challenge in the state. I think Representative Brewer likes to make the joke that Charleston is an hour away from Charleston. I've stolen that joke, but it's not an untrue statement anymore. That we have some real issues in our urban areas, and I'd say it's the same challenge in Greenville, the same challenge in Myrtle Beach that we're seeing, even to a certain extent here in the Columbia area. We've got to deal with that. But when you think about rural South Carolina, particularly with the exodus of jobs, the closure of hospitals, transportation is increasingly being that lifeline for folks that want to stay in those rural communities to get to a job, to get to health care. So we've got to balance this challenge of growing congestion, but also make sure that we don't forget about rural access and making it happen. And that means we've got to think differently than we've normally done. So in our urban areas, we're running out of real estate in some locations where we can do a widening. We've got to think about signal retiming, intersection improvements, new turn lanes, things like that that can get more throughput through the same basic width and volume, footprint that we have now. And we've got to think about things like transit differently than we've done before. There's a big project happening in the Charleston area, but it's going to be critical, I think, in our rural areas, and we've been working to restructure that across the board. And then fourth, and I've talked about it in our talking about a coordinating council, but at the end of the day, the Department of Transportation is just really highways and transit. That's our main challenge. You look at our state railroad, Palmetto Railways is in the Department of Commerce. The State Ports Authority drives a huge part of my capital plan in terms of what we have to do. The widening of 26 is being driven because of the truck traffic coming out of the Port of Charleston and the Port of Savannah. So we've got to better align those activities. So obviously I've talked about a coordinating council, but regardless of whatever legislative action happens, we know at the DOT that we've got to work better together and coordinate better with the other modes so that our investments are aligned and targeted together. So what I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation is that the momentum plan includes what we call a gap, and it's a requirement that we put in a gap of what would be needed to invest in our system. And so we did the calculation of where we would need to go as a state. This is really on 2024 numbers of the additional investment needed. It totals just under $1 billion and really focuses in a series of key areas. One, we've got to continue to invest in bridges. Right now, our base budget is $239 million on bridges. We've been very fortunate and grateful that the General Assembly's given us one-time money on it, but if we're going to build a consistent pipeline where we're delivering projects, I need to have confidence and assurance that there is recurring money there. We've got to continue to invest in our interstates. So we put in close to $500 million into our interstates now. We've gotten one-time money that has helped move that along. But when you talk about just the 526 project in Charleston, that is a $7 billion project from end to end from West Ashley to Mount Pleasant. So if you put that into context with our current levels of investment, we have the potential to be having to spend 15 to 20 years of our money just on that one project alone. We need to continue investing in regional mobility like we have been doing over the past few years, but you'll see things like ITS and TSMO. And what that is working on adding technology, adding cameras, retiming signals, those type of things that can move throughput through. But you can kind of see just across the board. Now, again, it's not saying that the department needs $1 billion immediately right now, but it's a 25-year vision. But if there's a desire to start tackling growth, then there's going to have to be the investment that comes along with it as well. And this is just in the summary number right now of where we are in terms of what we are programming. It's just about $2.3 billion per year into projects, but needing in maintenance, but needing an additional billion or so necessary if we really want to start tackling the growth and congestion we're seeing across the state. With that, Madam Chairs, I am happy to answer any questions on any number of topics beyond the momentum plan.
Mills is going to start watering and fertilizing whatever money trees he can find. Right, Mills? That's the number one on his list. Members, past that, one job, the money tree, Mills. Members, any questions for Secretary Powell on that? Mr. Vaughan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Secretary Powell. Appreciate your time. I just have a couple questions on what you talked about. The port increase. We got the inland port in Greenville. I was curious if you had any numbers on exactly what their plans were. I know I've heard a lot of different things come out of there, but more specifically, how many of these actual, like we know that the port in Charleston has plans to expand greatly. How much of this actually hits our interstate system? How much of this is final miles to the destination, right? Because I mean, you know, the upstate, you spoke about it. Yeah. There's bigger industry in certain parts, and I know that's the pockets that you're talking about. So just curious about the numbers that you have on. That's one of my questions.
Sure. So certainly, you know, I talk frequently with port leadership. I'm actually an ex officio member of the port board, so we talk frequently on that. The inland port in Greer, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, is considered to be the most successful inland port in the country. Really started as to benefit BMW, but BMW is now a much smaller percentage of it. In terms of the impacts and the challenges that we have with that, it definitely moves traffic off of I-26 and off of I-385 because they're moving basically those boxes and those cars up basically once a day, up and back on the Norfolk Southern line there. But what it does is it shifts it to Highway 290 and to I-85. So it doesn't wholly replace all of the truck traffic. It really just kind of moves that truck traffic from there. You know, one of the big challenges we have is that the main container terminal that we have is the Wando Welch terminal, was built without rail access to it. So all of those containers, when they get unloaded in Mount Pleasant, they have to get on I-526 to get to, even if they're getting put on a train, get taken to North Charleston where the CSX and Norfolk Southern switching yards are, and then moved out from there. So, you know, they're going through a pretty, you know, there's new leadership at the port right now. They're going through a pretty extensive review of what their needs are. You know, they certainly have long-term expansion plans in terms of adding an addition, expanding a terminal up in North Charleston that they own, and they just bought a paper mill, a closed paper mill to build it from there. But we work closely with them in terms of where their needs are and where their timing is. I would say right now it's gotten a little more in flux with the recent kind of, as Mr. Malice gets into the seat and kind of understands what's needed. But they drive a lot of what we're dealing with. You know, the 526 project is driven in large part by the container volume we have. I-26 widening that we have is driven by the truck traffic that we see, and it's those container trucks that are going up to the upstate from often to the manufacturing plants towards your district. So we know that, and it's why we need to work. We work closely with them now, but it's been on personal relationships. We've got to have those formal mechanisms in place.
So with that, do you have do they have a plan in place to add rail at the Wando?
So it's probably going to be very difficult to get rail to the Wando terminal. They are building a intermodal freight yard in North Charleston that's really to serve the Leatherman terminal, which is the new one that they just opened, but could serve that traffic. That project is, I think, a few years out from completion in terms of being done. But obviously, I think I'm a big firm believer in all of the above and moving containers. It doesn't all have to be on the interstates, it doesn't have to be on rail. I think they all complement and move together from there.
Okay. All right. Total shift, and I agree with you. You touched on this, but this is, I think we're all starting to see, especially in Greenville County, I think we're doing a great job on the roads. I mean, actually, I get some complaints now that we're doing too much road work. They can't get, I turn left and there's road work. I turn right and there's road work. But we are doing a great job in Greenville getting these roads repaired. But I learned something that I didn't realize in Greenville County that I think Greenville County owns one light. And I don't know how that happened, but the DOT owns all the lights. And I know they did a kind of a plan with the city where they come up with their, very fancy light group of people who go through and they watch the lights. It's like you see on TV. They got it all up on the board, and they're constantly modern, trying to make it more modern and algorithms and keep up with where the bog downs are. But with that being said, signal timing, anywhere there's construction, typically you'll find some problems that it'll mess up the timing on the lights. And it doesn't take, I feel like I call all the time. I say, this light's messed up. He's like, yeah, I know. We know that one's messed up. We got to get that fixed. And it can be just a 45-second window, but sometimes it's just, there's so many people coming to the intersection. You can't have them all green all the time. So I guess my big question in all that statement is there a possibility, or is it a funding mechanism, or are you already headed that way in where you look at the lights from a state perspective, or do you have a program in place where we can have the counties, maybe through the guidance of the DOT, take back, we've talked about taking back miles of road, taking lights and monitoring them.
Sure. So let me break that one down in a couple different chunks. So traffic signals are generally either maintained either by the DOT, by our district traffic engineers, that will manage and maintain signals. Now, in several of our larger municipalities and a couple of our counties, they do maintain signal systems. So you mentioned the city of Greenville maintains basically the signal systems on the state routes, and they get some money from us to do that, but they have put in there, and that's probably one of the best examples in the state of how a local government can manage the signals, and we have a good working relationship with them. But kind of to the prior point in terms of retiming signals, because I think there are gains that could be made in terms of making sure that we've optimized those signal timings. So we have done really two things recently as it comes to that. The first is when we talk about our MPO and COG program, what we have done has really trying to focus those bodies to look at major corridors. We actually have kind of an application that maps out kind of what is the worst corridors. Now you could usually get, in your neck of the woods, it's going to be Woodruff Road is going to trigger that. But then coming up with strategies of how you can address those issues, and so that it can be, you can jump to widening being one of those items, but sometimes you can retime a signal, you can add a turn lanes at critical intersections. And so what we've been trying to do is push those MPOs and council of governments to focus on, targeted, affordable projects that can do that. The same thing here, and if you see here, I put up there, it says ITS TSMO. What that is, Intelligent Transportation Systems and Transportation Systems Management and Operation, TISMO. What that is we received additional funding in the last federal infrastructure bill that's really focused on air pollution and congestion. And so we have dedicated those dollars really into two areas. One, expanding our fiber network on our interstates. So the cameras that you see on 385 and 85 of congestion there, making sure that we have that on basically the entire interstate network so that we can look at that comprehensively. But what we've also been doing is allocating funds to do and working to identify where corridors need to be retimed. And so that's been starting to get out the way. I'm not saying it's fully in the way, but that is a relatively new initiative that we are kicking off because what we recognize is in some cases you can't widen your way out of congestion, but there are ways that you can try to put more throughput through.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Representative Garvin.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary Powell, for being here once again today. I oftentimes think about long-term, and I really love the concept of your Momentum 2050 because that's 25 years from now. And I oftentimes think about what, number one, will this room look like in 25 years, but what will our roles look like in 25 years? And I think one of the key things that I heard you say earlier is that money and making that investment is going to be key to the success. So in 25 years from now, and this is a hypothetical, what would success look like for the DOT as well as future General Assemblies when they look back at the work that we have done today? What will success look like in 25 years?
So to me, I think you've got to look at the state in two lenses. So I think you've got to look at urban South Carolina, and I'm talking suburban, urban, kind of the metropolitan areas that we have in place, and we are moving forward programs that can help keep those areas moving. We have real risks and we already have risks of gridlock in certain parts of the state, and so I mean, if you look at certain parts of the Charleston area right now, it is gridlock, and it has broken down. You're starting to see that in parts of Greenville, and you've seen places where they've had local option sales taxes that they've been able to do it. So we've got to be able to, and again, you're never going to be able to get it back to, you're always going to get a green light, and you can always get to wherever you want to be in 12 minutes, but you do need to have that ability that it's predictable, reliable, and people have options to get to where they're going. I think what we've got to look at is our rural areas is that we are able to not get people left behind because they don't have access to adequate transportation. And so those are going to be, I think, key factors for us going forward because we really have two South Carolinas forming right now between our metro areas and our rural areas.
And I appreciate that. So we see the risk and we see what happens when you defer maintenance and when you don't make that sort of necessary investment. And we're trying to now fix the problem. South Carolina, as you mentioned, is a fast-growing state. How does Momentum 2050 compare to similarly situated states that are also growing fast?
I mean, I think each one of our counterpart states have similar type plans, and I would say have similar type strategies to what they're working on. So whether it's North Carolina or Georgia, they will look at other things in their toolbox to deliver that project. So I'll share my counterparts in Georgia have a very aggressive plan for choice lanes in Metro Atlanta that they know that they can't widen the perimeter I-285 to 18 lanes, and you already deal with that going through downtown Atlanta, and it's somewhat terrifying, and it's always congested anyways, regardless if it's 16 lanes across. So they've definitely embraced that approach. It's something that I really can't put on the table in South Carolina in our metro areas, but it's something that they've looked at, and I would say North Carolina, Florida, Virginia, all are doing something similar as well in terms of dealing with those issues.
Excellent. And this is just more of a statement than a question. I think for so many years, we've heard when people travel through South Carolina on the interstate, they always would say they know that they're in South Carolina because the quality of the roads change. And so I'm happy that we're making progress. And so just want to keep pushing. And in 25 years, I'm sure that you'll still be here, and looking forward to a good report and about the success of all the good work that DOT has done because of the investment of this General Assembly. Thank you.
To see what my hairline looks like in 25 years.
Mine too.
Thank you, Mr. Carvin. Good questions. I think Mr. Chapman's next.
Thank you. I've got a couple of, I got two questions mainly, and I'm going to start with the bigger one, I think. You mentioned a project, $7 billion. Can you explain how that project came to be and where it is in the process? Because when I look at the monies that you're saying that we need for our future needs, and then you say that it's a 15-year of that allotment, can you explain how we got to that project on the table and where it is in the process?
Sure. So we have a requirement by the General Assemblies that we have to prioritize and rank our projects. So we do that by program. We don't do a giant statewide list. We do it by interstate program. And so I would say I got to think about how old this list is, but basically it was a list that came up and identified interstate segments in the state that were the most congested in that, and that was how Malfunction Junction got on the list here in the Columbia area, how the 385-85 Gateway interchange that's now complete in the Greenville area got on the list. Basically, it identified that between West Ashley and Mount Pleasant was an area of significant congestion. And I would say that is one of, when I look at the map in the state at rush hour, that is one of the red hot spots that comes up routinely. So the data proves it out from there. The challenge on that project is the sheer amount of structures that we have to build. So unlike an interstate in the upstate or in Columbia area, we're talking about a tremendous amount of bridges. So when you think about going from Mount Pleasant, you're crossing the Wando River there, you're a little bit on Daniel Island, then when you get to North Charleston, it's an elevated structure for miles until you get to the airport. Then you cross into West Ashley, again, large elevated structure, taking it from there. So that's what's driving the cost up significantly. We have to basically retrofit everything on that structure, on those structures, because it was built before our current seismic design standards were put in place. So we know that we need to replace basically all the bridges in that corridor so that we make sure if that earthquake does happen in Charleston that they'll stand up. So that's really the cost driver. Where that project stands right now is we have a permit basically for the western half of the project, basically from the old paper mill in North Charleston back to West Ashley and through the interchange. We're in the early stages of completing what I call our community commitments, things that we said that we would do to mitigate the impacts of the project, and we're starting the right-of-way on it. And that right-of-way bill is in the hundreds of millions of dollars for what we're having to do. So it's still in the I would say construction is still in the 2030s on the current timeline, but it will take us, it's not a project that'll be done in a 3-year span. This is going to be a decades-long plus project.
Okay, well, that's a good segue into my last question, and it deals with bridges. So, this committee is future needs, and to understand, what the current system is and what we're going to look at as far as how we categorize our bridges. And I think I asked this question a little bit, I think at one of our subsequent meetings, or earlier meetings, but when we look at bridges, you have 2-lane, 4-lane, and even some that are more than that. But when you look at bridges that are in the upstate that have deep foundations, and then you have ones in the Midlands that are middle, or shorter foundations, and then maybe a different type of foundation in the coastal areas. How do we categorize the priorities of our bridges if we have a bridge that's 75 feet in foundation in the upstate, but yet 30 feet in the middle part of the state. How do you categorize those to determine priority of need?
So the prioritization process for bridges really doesn't look at the foundation structure of the bridges. What it's looking at is really going to be based on the condition assessment. So we do an inspection on every single one of our bridges in the state at a minimum of a 2-year interval. It can be done, but basically is looking at every single component of the bridge from substructure, superstructure, and the deck. So that feeds a big chunk of our rating criteria from there. So that if a bridge is rated as 4s compared to 9s, the bridge that's rated 4s, which is poor condition, is going to clearly get on the list before that. It doesn't necessarily consider it's an upstate bridge versus a low country bridge. It's looking at its condition. Second major piece is we look at in traffic. So if it's a bridge that carries 50 cars a day versus a bridge that carries 2,000 cars a day, obviously the bridge that carries more traffic is going to get weighted higher on that priority list from there. So that's that. And then we look at the load postings. Sometimes it's a design, sometimes it's just condition that drives that load posting as well as closures. And we look at the detours. If it's a low volume bridge that the detour, it's posted, but there's a detour 1 mile away, that's going to have less of an impact than if it's a 20-mile long detour that goes from there. So that's how we come up with that rating process. The challenge we have in the upstate is that in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, we made a decision to build a ton of bridges with timber piles as the support piers for those structures. And as a result, wood and water after 60 years starts deteriorating. I mean, that's just kind of a fact of the matter. And so what we have, and I would say it is particularly acute in Pickens County, Anderson County, Oconee, Greenville, and Spartanburg, where a ton of those bridges were built over that time. That's what's driving that issue, that those bridges, one, weren't really designed for today's trucks, and two, they were built, for lack of a better term, they were built cheaply, and we are now paying for that price of that decision years later, which is why when we do our bridge projects today, we are not coming back with a timber pile bridge. We're putting in concrete and steel where it is so that we build those bridges to last 75 years than a 50 or 60 year lifespan what we're dealing with in the upstate right now.
Okay, and I'll just follow up with my first question. $7 billion could replace a lot of bridges throughout the entire state, as opposed to one section that you said is primarily elevated, is the way you determined it, correct?
Yes, sir. And what I will say is that corridor is got significant, I would say we need more money in bridges. And I've been very abundantly clear from day one as secretary, we need more money for bridges. But we cannot underinvest in our interstate system, regardless of where it is, because at the end of the day, those containers are heading to the Michelin plants in Anderson and Greenville. They're going to the BMW plant. So we've got to balance that whole issue out. And I think that's why I'll put it out there that we need to think about that choice lanes concept that I was talking with Representative Garvin on. I can't even put that on the table, and that may be an opportunity for us to help bring down the capital costs to the state on that type of project, but I can't necessarily put it on the table because I don't have the legal authority to do so right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Good questions. Mr. Stavrakis, you got the question, Mr. Stavrakis? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Secretary Powell. First, I want to say this. I want to thank you for your personal involvement in all of these meetings. I mean, it's really been impressive and refreshing to have you as the leader of the organization standing up there at every single meeting and leading your agency and our state's future in helping us to unwind and tackle a very complicated and difficult set of problems to deal with. So I want to thank you for your leadership and your personal involvement every step of the way. Back to that project, I do think it's important to point out, I don't know if folks drive down to Charleston much from other parts of the state, but I would ask you, it's not just 526. That traffic backs up onto 26 because of the level of dysfunction every single day, multiple times a day. So you literally will have a line of traffic on I-26 that's bumper to bumper trying to get onto 526 in two different directions. So it's really not just a 526 problem, which may not resonate with as many folks. I mean, I-26 is severely and dramatically impacted, and I think you would echo that it really impacts I-26 as well, which is, of course, our state's major commercial artery, and also for commuter travel at least in our region, just a massive, massively important artery. Secretary, you mentioned something that was music to my ears, which is the talk about signalization and flow. I know you and I have talked about this a lot. I know you know my district well, and I appreciate that. And I've got several corridors that fit to a T what you were describing. They cannot be widened anymore. Savannah Highway, Folly Road, Wesley Drive, even Maybank to an extent on the James Island side. And improving that flow, I think, is something that we have to really, really look at. I appreciate you focusing on that. I would again, though, ask you, like, do we need, especially in the areas where you've devolved some of that control to major municipalities, do we need to set some standards? Like, do we need to say that when that happens, you know, that there are some standards that have to be met so that the highest and best technologies are always being used to maximize that traffic flow? Just would throw that out there again for you to comment on. I certainly love the investment and the fact that you're focusing on it, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, so those municipal agreements, we have one with the City of Charleston, Town of Mount Pleasant, Charleston area, just like we have City of Greenville, City of Columbia. What I would say is that the state gets a bargain on those to a certain extent. What I mean by that is that in exchange, we don't pay the equal amount of what it costs to maintain and operate those signals. So you're getting that local share into that maintenance from there. So obviously we do have routine agreements with them that kind of sets the standards by which we work on it. But I would say is some local governments put more into it than others. I mean, Representative Vaughn talked about the City of Greenville and building a traffic management center up there. I think that's something we can kind of dig into, but at the end of the day, I probably need more money to go into it to focus. And right now I'm taking federal funds to pay for retiming studies and upgrades from there.
Well, that's what we're here for, right? I mean, if that helps you solve major problems that otherwise lead to $7 billion projects, and a much smaller investment helps deal with some of those problems, then, you know, that's what we need to know and to be doing. Kind of what, you know, drives that for me is, you know, personal experience, talking to my constituents who deal with those issues on a daily basis. You mentioned, you know, the number one thing being congestion. No, hands down, where I live, that's the number one issue I hear from my constituents. I think sometimes on this issue, there's a frustration that a municipality might have some interest in a different timing structure because they're approving a subdivision or an apartment complex or something on a road that intersects with a major highway, right? And I think when we get to that point, like, there's not a common interest necessarily between your interest in seeing US 17, for example, move as freely as possible, and their interest in making sure they accommodate this new project, right? And so that's why I'm saying maybe some standards in certain isolated, really important corridors might be something helpful. But for me, I'm thinking that I have no idea what that standard would look like. Like, I'm happy to be the bad guy and take that on if you guys have any ideas about it. Looking at your current spending and future needs chart, I'm a little bit surprised at the transit number. I know that's not for every part of the state, but my feeling has always been, or at least what I've always heard, is those are really expensive projects. Obviously, I would assume for any of them, you're anticipating some federal involvement, but I would have expected to see a bigger number there. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, no, so we are in the, I'll get into it with the Revenue and Fiscal Committee, but we have to dedicate the 28.75 cents of the gas tax, we have to allocate it in certain ways statutorily. We have to put 1/10 of 1 penny towards, or 1/4 of 1 penny towards transit in the state. So that equals to about $6 million. So right now, that's what we provide as a state to basically all of the transit providers, whether it's a CARTA in Charleston down to a smaller system, a rural system from there. Basically, this number came in is a recognition of if we were to try to start maxing out the match of the federal money that we have available to us, particularly on the rural side of things, $12 million would help us basically maximize the federal share instead of requiring a mix of local and state dollars to get there. But I think when you get into, and particularly in your area, there's a pretty major project underway. We are actively participating and involved with Charleston County and CARTA and the BCD COG on getting that built. But I'd like to see that one get out the ground and succeed first, and if that's a model that can be replicated elsewhere in the state as well.
So I guess what I'm taking from your comment there is this is what you view out of your current revenue stream, what you would be allocating, not necessarily what the state or certain parts of the state need to be coming up with for transit.
And transit is both a local and state-funded program. Obviously, certain counties that have sales tax programs, Charleston, Richland, have put in dollars into maintaining their transit systems. This was really to make sure that we could bring basically every dollar that we are entitled to from the feds, try to maximize that money coming down. But one of the things that we are doing, we're in a pretty significant rehaul of our transit program right now, and one of the things that I have asked our folks to do, and we're getting it procured right now, is a statewide transit plan. That we've got to define what transit's supposed to be in terms of the state. Is it in my mind, it's moving workforce. That we've got, when I talk with Department of Employment and Workforce, one of the biggest challenges now getting people to jobs is transportation. And so I think we've got to come up with that plan first, and that may come up with a new number at a certain point, but that at the time, based on the information we had, it was really to maximize our federal reimbursements.
Okay, that makes sense. And then on the maintenance, let me ask you, I saw your chart, and, I will tell you a very close number 2 in my area, our area, is drainage problems and associated frustration where, so many of these corridors, part of it's in a city, a county, DOT, and, the maintenance of the drainage, roadside drainage, is a huge problem, huge concern. Is that reflected in those numbers, and how would a divestment of some of that might that change the number you have on that line, or do you still think you would need the same amount of money there?
I don't think you can underinvest in maintenance. So let me put that out there. Let me just give you a little context. So we put out, we have our construction program, which is well over $2 billion. So we have our personnel costs, so about 4,000 employees. 2,700 of them are in our field maintenance units that are doing pothole repairs, drainage issues, mowing grass. All 46 of our counties, so we have a maintenance unit in every single one of our counties. We divide up $184 million amongst them for their maintenance expenses of, contracts to mow, to buy aggregate, to buy asphalt, to do patching on that. That number has been largely flat over the past several years, and that's because at the end of the day, our maintenance program is being paid for out of the 16-cent gas tax, the original gas tax that we've had in place. That's been flat for several years. So at the end of the day, while their costs have gone up in terms of inflation that we've talked about, we've got to hold the budget. So what I would say is this will help them basically deliver what they're asked to deliver. I would say if the system shrank, and I brought in a map I showed to the Organizational Review Committee of the routes that we would consider for a voluntary divestment of the system if local governments wanted it. I think we still have plenty of work on our primary network and our high-volume arterials and our interstates, that workforce and the funds that we're putting to them will still be needed to do the normal routine maintenance that we're doing, and that I'll just be honest, we struggle to keep up with, not because of lack of trying, but just because of we have a large system to maintain with a finite amount of resources.
Thank you, Mr. Stavronakis. If I could ask to piggyback on Representative Stavronakis' question, that $184 million, that's all 46 counties. Is there some type of, obviously, not every county is going to get the same amount of maintenance. Is there a formula on how that happens?
So what we do is we take off the top certain things that we manage directly out of headquarters. So mowing contracts is an example, that we want to maintain the mowing cycles of 6 times on the interstates, 4 times on that rest area maintenance, those type of things. Once you get below kind of that level there, and then like the salt that we buy for snow and ice conditions, so we budget for that statewide. Then that is distributed. What I would say is largely based off of lane miles. There's a little calculation on traffic, a little bit of calculation on some of the other infrastructure items that they have to maintain. But at the end of the day, it's based on the number of state maintained lane miles in that county that unit gets.
Thank you. Mr. Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, ladies. Good morning, Secretary Powell. How you doing?
I'm good, sir.
Good. I did not have a Coca-Cola before this one. I had a coffee a while back, so.
Was it an espresso, sir?
Yeah, I've not been too jittery today. So again, let's go through some things. And again, I want to piggyback on Rep. Stavronakis' thanks to you, because this is time consuming. I know you need to be running an agency, and I'm thankful that you have your folks here and you're helping invest in what your future is going to look like with what this committee decides. So thank you so very much for that. So I want to start with, you've brought us a lot of stuff, right? You brought us some stuff, and money's been the main central theme for everything, and we understand that money is going to drive everything. I think we've often said we can rebuild the engine, but if we have no gasoline, it's not going to go anywhere, right? So what are some other things from a legislative ask? Let's start with Act 114. We live and die with Act 114. Act 114 drives how we rank projects and how we put projects out there. Are there changes that you would recommend to that at this time that this committee should be able to consider or should consider to look at changing? Because that's what we need to do. It's been in place for a while. Let's see if it's still effective.
You and I have talked about that issue, and I went back to the statute again just to see where it goes. And again, I think all of the key factors are in there. If there was anything that we may want to look at, and again, and it's hard, Act 114 goal was to turn things into quantifiable analytical to take the politics out of project selection. But I think the challenge, and I don't know if I have a complete solution on it, but what I would just say is that land use component of when, you know, a local government is making a land use decision, how that lines up or doesn't line up with what we have on the transportation plans. You know, there's some language in there that might be an area to beef it up in. And again, I'd have to think about it, because at the end of the day, it's still heavily focused on pavement conditions, bridge conditions, the traffic that's in there. I mean, it's designed to drive to a utilitarian way. It's the most benefit for the most people within the amount of money that we have. But I would say that how you get into a situation where you have a local making land use decisions that we don't necessarily have clear link to, and again, I don't want to have the Department of Transportation involved in whether a property should be residential or commercial. That needs to be a local decision.
That makes sense. But that's something that we need to work on, and we need to get some language together to put in front of this group for our bill, because we've got to start looking more and more into stuff. Just because something's in law right now and it's prohibiting us to do something doesn't mean that this is the opportunity for us to make that change, to be able to grow and be better, give you a better department going forward with some of those languages. Looking through things, you know, when I look at what you were showing for current spending and future needs, you know, I look at this and I understand exactly what you're saying. I know what you're getting. You've got your everything from rail to TISMO to bridge to pavement. You've got all your programs in there. One of the things that's hard that I hear from a lot of folks is that, you know, like a sales tax referendum, when it goes to pass, we have to list projects. We have to show the public exactly what they're getting for the tax that they're voting for. And I'd ask that on some of this stuff that we start sharing some of these projects, and we put in the projects out there that these equate to, so it will ring true to each person, so they know what's happening in their district with these investments and what we're looking at. And it helps drive home, you know, it's not $200 million or $760 million going to pavement. It's this road, these roads, this cluster of roads in these districts that are going to help your area out. And the reason why I bring that up is because the first thing everybody says, well, that must be going on in Charleston. And us in Charleston are saying that must be going on in Greenville, because it's needed everywhere, right? So just food for thought on that is something that would help us. And as you're asking for reoccurring investments, we need to know which projects they're going to. And it would help not only us, but it'll also help our contract partners to have, so, you know, a couple-year look ahead of what they've got for projects, so that way they can plan, we can talk about it, we can get to where we need to go, and we can help drive funding for those things as well.
And I'll just kind of chime on that. There are resources we do have on our website now. There's the Project Viewer website, which has a map. I will be the first to admit it needs improvement from where it is today. All of our priority lists are listed and put up there as well. One of the things the Senate put in the budget, I want to say about 2 years ago, there's a proviso for us to work towards improved dashboard reporting, not only on projects in the pipeline, but also projects that are on the horizon. One of the challenges, I'll just have to admit, is that we've got to rebuild the back end of our IT infrastructure, and that's been a major project of mine. So basically, we still have things on a mainframe that we're trying to shut down and move things over onto more of the state's accounting system from there. Once we get that in place, then there are opportunities for us to improve our project management software that we have internally that can provide that data about forward-looking at where we are and things on development. Our STIP software, I'll be the first to admit that it's not readily accessible and understandable, but if I get the back end fixed, that's kind of the first foundational piece, but then we can start moving to more dashboards and more public reporting from there.
And let me be clear, you have probably the most transparent amount of information of any DOT I've seen in the country. It's just hard to find sometimes, but you definitely have more information up there. You can consume yourself for weeks on trying to get all the information, but it would help to kind of make it a little bit easier. Going down to some of the other things, the SIB. I haven't heard you talk too much about the SIB, and I know y'all have a great partnership with the SIB. And how can we use this? You know, in my former life, I traveled around the country, and everywhere I went, the very first thing they brought up when we would mention we're from South Carolina would be, y'all have the greatest tool on the planet with y'all State Infrastructure Bank. And the way we used it for Ravenel Bridge worked amazingly. What are some of the recommendations that you and them may have together to hopefully maximize that tool going forward as well and leverage a lot of our funding?
So the one thing that we've kind of suggested in the process right now, so the SIB is 4 appointees of the General Assembly, so 1 House member, 1 Senate member, and then 1 private citizen appointed both by the President and the Speaker. And then the governor appoints the chair and vice chair of it, and then the chair of the DOT commission is on there. Our commission chair changes once a year. So we have a new chair every year. One of the things that we've proposed is having the secretary serve out as the ex officio member on the board to do that. And it's really for continuity and consistency that we have that project narrative history from there, and I think that would help improve. And I have a great working relationship with former House colleague yours, Charles Cannon here, who's I think still behind me. I haven't looked, but
best hair in the whole crowd over there.
He's got much better hair than I do, but he's been a good partner in helping us work better together. The SIB obviously can be a vehicle for local governments to leverage and expand their programs. It's also the vehicle by which we could borrow money if we so desired. So I think having that continuity and consistency would help by having, the same person on. The chair always changes from our side, and all the other board members stay the same. That would help make sure that we have the same group in the room.
I'd agree. That's a very good start for there. But as far as the projects they would help you with, when we initially created the SIB, it was for these mega projects, and now it's kind of devolved into some other areas and going after different areas and different projects and smaller projects. But our projects aren't getting smaller. Our projects are getting bigger. Yeah. And to me, it's a tool that I think we should use for our bigger projects. And let's not forget, like the Lake Marion Bridge, that's in a rural area.
Yeah.
So this isn't just for the big cities of South Carolina. This is for rural projects as well. That's couple $100 million+ bridge going in a very rural area that a SIB type funding mechanism may help us get better bonding, better money, leverage more money or something. So is there anything from that standpoint that you have in your mind or that you were looking at?
No, at the end of the day, they are required to follow. Again, I don't want to speak too much on another state agency.
Correct.
But they are required to follow the same procedures as we do under Act 114, but they're allowed to determine their own priorities from within that list. So they look at it in the universe of the projects that have been basically an application's been turned into. I think if we could find more ways to better link the state's program and priorities into that, and then where the local programs that are supplementing in can work together on that'd be an area. And I think we've been really I've spent my entire tenure really as secretary working with them on trying to close the gaps on a lot of the projects that were funded back in 2021 that weren't necessarily fully shovel-ready, that are now just starting to happen. The Hilton Head Bridge, the York County interchanges, those projects. That's really what's kind of focused our time and effort. And I think, where we can have things more shovel-ready for them would make things a lot better than where we are today. Okay. But I don't want to, it's been, Mr. Cannon has been a breath of fresh air and the relationship between our two agencies is probably stronger than it's been in a long time.
Thank you. One more thing. So, when you ask for funding in buckets. And, one thing that we cleared up in the Sumter meeting that, hey, look, you got plenty of contractors. We know that there is not a shortage of contractors. And when you've asked for buckets of money, usually it's been in $200 million for bridges, and that's about where we've stayed at. What I'd ask is that you consider a grant program type of bucket of money to ask for this year. And I know you've asked for a lot of money, and I'm telling you, if I were you, I'd ask for every bit of our budget and let us tell you no, right? Ask for it all, and then let us tell you no for what we have. But the grant funding, what I'm telling you about is there's all these smaller projects that a lot of municipalities, counties, and sales tax referendum programs have that are 75% funded, but they need to get that last little bit to get them over the edge. And I'm going to tell you, that'll help a lot of capacity projects. That'll help a lot of local projects that will get turn lanes done, that would get your TSMO stuff done, that would help time lights in different areas and help improve quality of life amongst people. And put a maximum ask on it. You know, if you put $200 million out there, you got 46 counties and God knows how many cities that we have through the state. Put a maximum they can ask, but I promise you it would be fully asked for because there's that many projects. Heck, just in Charleston and Dorchester alone, we could probably ask for it in smaller projects to put up there. But that's something that will help quality of life and capacity today, and I think it'd be something that it would be well for you to have included in your budget.
Certainly, and obviously the sausage is already getting well made on the state budget at this point in time, but something we can definitely think about, is, if not this year, in subsequent years.
Sounds good. And I'll save my rest for discussion with us. Thank y'all.
Certainly. I believe that's all of our committee members who are present right this minute. Any other members of our larger committee? Mr. Vaughn, you need to follow up? Absolutely.
One quick one. One of the things I learned that you just touched on, we have, get to my notes here, 71 cities and 200 towns, so 271. What can we do? I mean, we all have those, and I know that we had several mayors come to our meetings. So what's some things that you see that we could look at, that we could do to help these municipalities that are dealing with such growth? You know, I've got three great cities: Malden, Simpsonville, Fountain Inn. They're growing like crazy. What can we do to put into place, maybe legislatively, that can help them keep from triggering, say, a Woodruff Road?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, at the end of the day, that's what we use the metropolitan planning organizations for, is just to try to integrate their land use plans and their local decisions into that issue. You know, certainly, if there is, you know, I've heard from municipalities, and we can't forget the 46 counties as well. That's where the majority of the population of the states lives, or in the unincorporated areas. You know, I think there's some discussion about, you know, and I brought the map of roads that the DOT be willing to consider relinquishing, but I think at the end of the day, they're going to need tools and incentives to do that, because at the end of the day, I think there are a number of local governments in the state that could take on some of these things and handle it, you know, just as well as the Department of Transportation is. So I would say, I think we could talk about that issue as well. Obviously, I try to maintain a good rapport and dialogue, and our team maintains good rapport and dialogue with the local government associations as well as the individual local governments. But, you know, from time to time, something crops up, but it's making sure that they know who the local people are on the ground. So, knowing the county maintenance engineer and the district engineering administrator is oftentimes the fastest way to solve something. A lot of city managers know me from my old days in local government and think that calling me gets it solved faster, when they could have just called the district office in Greenville or in Chester, and it gets solved a lot faster.
Brendan is great, by the way, so he's doing a great job. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Any other of our members have questions? Mr. Robbins? Absolutely. Of course.
And Brewer's comments about, thank you, about our, about your presence here and the amount of information that y'all continue to compile that is pertinent to the issues that we face. And I know you get a lot of arrows and darts thrown at you and your agency from a number of folks who sometimes don't know what they're really talking about, but it's easy to get picked on in your position. But I just appreciate the information that you have provided today, and I'm looking at the two maps that I think every citizen ought to see, and I hope that y'all will get these up on your website if they're not there already. But the growth rate map, and then coming down to the, and certainly I think we all knew what congestion and bottleneck was going to be in terms of the rankings, and 63% on congestion, 23% on road conditions. I mean, that's what we hear every day. But my question really centers around the change in miles traveled map that you put together. And I just think this is one of the best pieces of information that I have seen in a concise one-page document in quite some time. And is there any discussion at the DOT right now about trying to allocate paving dollars based on this map? Because as I see this map, my county, my home county, my district that I've lived in my entire life is experiencing significant change, is one of the darkest red districts in the entire state, as is Charleston. And can we use this map to change the way pavement dollars are allocated?
So right now, pavement dollars, and obviously we had this discussion when you were on the commission years ago. Right now, pavement dollars are the interstate pavement dollars are basically allocated statewide. So we allocate those based on the condition of the interstate, regardless of the county or the district where it's occurring. Then we allocate our paving dollars for each one of our systems, the primary network, the federal aid secondary, and the non-federal aid secondary, based on the lane miles within a county. So I would say is that while I understand the wear and tear that we have in certain counties, we still have to make sure that we do this. And I shared this story yesterday with the Organizational Review Committee. We used to rank pavement dollars for our primary network on our national highway system. So those are your US 17s, that's your US 378s, your US 29s, kind of our highest volume primary routes that are not on the interstate. We used to do that statewide, and we used the traffic as being that. And what was doing was actually gravitating funding dollars to one particular corner of the state, and that was one of the co-chairs is counties, because of just the high volume of tourist traffic going into that area. So what was happening was there were certain counties that weren't getting paving dollars as a result. So I guess what I would say is it becomes a zero-sum game at some point, that if I reallocate based on congestion traffic from one area, I'm taking it away from the rural areas. So I would say right now, if you're looking at the pie as being finite and the same, there will be winners and losers in that equation. I think the issue is that we still have a challenge across the state that we've got to deal with, making sure that we've got to maintain the entire system from where we are right now.
And I appreciate that so much, and I want to say publicly, and particularly for the committee, Secretary Powell and his team have been so attentive to urgent needs that we've had in our county, and in Dorchester County, my home county, and I really appreciate that. But what I want to say back to you in response to that last statement, though, is that we got losers already on this map. We keep looking at there are going to be winners and losers. This map identifies where the problems are across the state and where they are not. And Dorchester is losing right now, and we need help.
Well-
And we can't continue to just allocate paving dollars the way we have in the past. I tried to change it in 2018, Madam Chair, when I was chairman of the commission, and it just didn't work. But I so appreciate this map because I think it makes my point.
Well, and what I would share, and there may be another map that we could provide the committee, but, on the flip side of that equation is our pavement quality index and kind of the overall condition of the network, and we have that broken down by county where it is, and I would say that we have to consider that equation in the pie too. If we were to move away from a system where we're just basically saying your lane miles get you to a certain % good, there are certain counties in the state where the system is in worse shape than in other counties of it, and some of that's just climate. In the lower half of the state, they don't have to deal with snow and ice like an upstate county does, and that can tear apart the roads a lot faster than we do. So, I mean, we can provide that by county, what the conditions are as well.
And that's another great point, because when we had that snowstorm in 2018 and the ice stayed on the ground for a solid week, you could see the immediate deterioration in the roads, which also brings me back to our county, where we have the most significant amount of truck traffic related to interstate construction, I think, of any other county in the state, and our roads are getting destroyed by completely loaded sand trucks that are running up and down our roads every day. So my point is, you cannot allocate paving dollars based on some lane miles traveled formula. You got to look at where the counties are getting the most traffic, and this map does it.
I felt like somebody needed to say amen. Thank you very much. Mr. Chapman, absolutely.
Is there a way to maybe add on that there's a plus percentage for the dark red versus the red versus the orange, and then maybe the green is just 1 point, where the red may be 2 points to add to the value of the traffic conditions.
So, and we can dig up this presentation. Representative Robbins was probably there. We did go through a process with the commission several years ago about other ways to divvy up the payment dollars right now. We looked at miles traveled. We looked at, do we do it like a CTC formula? Do we do it? So we can pull that up from several years ago. The current model, while it doesn't consider traffic into it, it doesn't penalize a county. So if a county has a sales tax or something like that has actually allowed their roads to get into better condition, they don't lose money because they've invested in themselves either as well. So we can provide that presentation from 2019. Again, it's a lot of inside baseball, but we can provide that to at least give some context of what we've considered and looked at in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? No, sir, Mr. Bowers, go right ahead.
I don't want to wear out my welcome being a visitor, but thank you, Director, for being here. I want to take you on a little trip. If you want to put your Clemson hat on, I know you got folks up there, but talk about Tismo. It's gone, but Tismo was up there a minute ago. You talked about using, I think you said using most of that money for interstate timing or interstate.
So we came up with a program. So one of the things that I can get the breakdown. I don't have it top of my head right now.
That's fine.
A big chunk of it. So if you go onto our 511 app, you can actually look at basically every traffic camera that we have in the state. Right now, those are predominantly on I-85 because that's our heavy truck corridor, and then it's on the I-26 and I-95 evacuation corridor so that we can track an evacuation.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I wanted that's where my trip goes. If you go to Clemson, often just about any time of the day. Traffic will be backed up all the way to the Oconee County line and to Issaquena Trail on 123, 4-lane road there all the time. And so you have hundreds of cars lined up on 123, and this is not an interstate, and that's where I'm going with this technology. There's nowhere else to pave, so we're going to have to use technology to try to fix the problem, I think. So there'll be 5-10 cars sitting at College Avenue, and they make the light turn red for hundreds of cars. Is there any plan in that TISMA of, I think it was $12 million, which doesn't look like enough with AI and all the things available nowadays through technology? It seems like if there are 4 cars sitting on College Avenue and hundreds sitting on 123, there ought to be a way that AI can figure that out and say, listen, you need to leave the 123 light green a little longer. So is there any consideration to it's good to have the camera systems on the interstate, but what would it take to get that technology moved to some of the rural areas, or not rural, but the areas that we can't widen? I know we can widen a lot of roads, but 123 is one that it's going to take technology to fix that problem. So
no, I mean, the technology's there. The technology is being used right now. I mean, we have call adaptive signals. So if you look at certain areas where you'll see a little camera on top of the traffic pole, that's basically to count the cues and to see what's waiting there and to make a decision. And so certainly like town of Lexington, where I live, has those that basically prioritizes movement of Highway 378.
That's what I'm talking
through town. Now, I've been stuck on the other side of it and waited a long time to get onto 378, but that's what that program is looking to. So obviously there's a big push to basically put fiber down the entire interstate corridor, but what we're also doing is trying to connect all of the municipal-owned systems into our own systems so that we can talk together on there and have that network feeding and connecting to each other, because that's really the foundation before you even talk about introducing AI or any other advanced technology. You've got to have the network there to get there. And then what we were asking is our district traffic engineers, as well as in the MPOs and council of governments, to look at those corridors where it makes most sense. And again, retiming sometimes is just changing the sequence based on where it is, but then an area like Clemson where you have peaks and valleys on traffic. Game day, it's the 4th largest city in the state at that point. And when April when the students are there, and then in June when they're not. So that can make it a little bit, but certainly we've been using that type of technology and increasing, and that's really what we're trying to do, is move towards smarter signals and smarter timings, and just letting it run based on the program from there. That makes sense, sir?
Relates to what Mr. Stavronak said. There's talk of putting a bypass around Clemson, I don't know, millions, billions of dollars, when we may be able to fix it with improve it dramatically with technology. So I just want to keep that on our radar and let us know if there's anything else we can do in that regard, because I've been going out and back to Charlotte for about 45 years now, business. And I remember 85 through Charlotte when it was 2 lanes, then it went to 3 lanes, and now it's 4 lanes and even more in places. We've got a loop around the city, the 485, I think it's called, and it's still a big old mess. So I don't think we're going to be able to pave our way out of this. We're going to have to. It seems like we may need to put more money toward TISMO or whatever acronym to use technology to manage our traffic. Came through. I went home last night. Yesterday morning, I left home at 5:30. Hardly had to slow down through Malfunction Junction. Well, this morning I was moving slower, and I didn't leave home until 5:50, 10 till 6. It was backed up to Irmo this morning, and it was a dead stop. all the way, and there was no accident, at least I didn't see one, all the way until I got to the Charleston, the 26th exit, and then it kind of opened back up. But as I sat there and watched, those folks coming in from, I think that's St. Andrews Road, maybe, it comes in there. Those folks are trying to get over here, and these folks over here were trying to get over there. And I know you have a plan to fix that, but it's frustrating to see that. It seems like I see in some places they have stoplights where you get on the interstate, and I don't know whether that works or not, but it kind of meters the St. Andrews Road in. Again, I guess my main point is I don't think we're going to pave our way out of the problem.
Yeah, the malfunction junction project, the challenge there is the design from the 50s where we got all those crossing movements, but ramp metering, which is, you see in Atlanta, and that is a technique, and it's something that we've talked about, at least on the 85 corridor, particularly by between BMW and the city of Greenville.
Absolutely. Members, anything else? Any more questions for Secretary Powell? Well, not quite as long as we anticipated, Secretary Powell, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
One thing that did come up while we were having the Q&A was questions about the SIB, and I know he's going to hate me for this, and I apologize right now, but Mr. Cannon, Charles Cannon, would you come up and entertain a couple of questions? Maybe, in case there are any, or at least, would you like to share anything with us? Yeah, please share.
Good morning.
Emma wants to make sure that you know she had nothing to do with calling you up to the podium and that it's all on me. Mills wants it clear. It's all Shannon. I did it. I'm sorry.
I thought you just wanted me to take a picture of you all.
Yeah, well, but you didn't get a good one, so now you got to come to the podium.
Well, good morning.
I'm teasing. Good morning.
So it's a little funny for me to be standing on this side of you all, since I worked with you, or most of you, for 20 plus years, and happily here to answer any questions, if there are any.
Gentlemen?
Madam Chair.
Absolutely, Mr. Brewer.
How you doing there, Mr. Cannon?
Good morning, Mr. Brewer.
Good to see you, my friend. You and I have had several talks, and looking at the SIB as the wonderful tool that it is, and the opportunities that we have in front of us to possibly help the state of South Carolina even more, correct?
Correct.
And I know you don't have anything prepared. I know you don't have anything in front of you, but so this would be off the top of your head. But what are there some ways that we can improve to be able to use the SIB to maximize dollars for the people of South Carolina, to leverage our funding via our sales tax programs, via our DOT, via whatever it is out there, that we can use this wonderful tool to help the people of South Carolina get more bang for their buck?
Yeah, well, as we have discussed this over the past several months, funding is always, and Secretary Powell has certainly hit on that as well. Funding is always a major key component of that. As you all know, we get truck registration fees, vehicle registration fees, several other fees that will come into our coffers every year. But when we have our rounds, those fees are committed, or those monies are committed. We have not had a large round in several years. As Secretary Powell mentioned, we've been dealing with some overages that came about after 2020 and 2021 and 2022, and we were trying to take care of those prior to having another large round. Funding and being able to bond money it would be a huge assistance for the bank. In saying that, the key part of that is that it needs to be a fee. We can take those fees to the bond market and triple our money and triple our value. That is really one of the largest hurdles that we face is that and shovel-ready projects.
That being, the fee being because the fee's consistent and a tax could come and go, correct?
Correct.
So that.
We can't bond tax
Correct.
money.
So what are there anything that y'all have been targeting, anything that you think would fit within y'all's realm that we need to be considering to help this? Because right now you have a dwindling source of income of our monies to bond, correct?
We have a consistent, but it is not keeping up with today's cost.
Correct.
Of projects where an interchange, for example, used to be about $35 to $45 million, depending. Now it's $100 million approximately, 85 to $100 million. So things are doubled, as Secretary Powell has certainly mentioned in all of his many presentations. So even with the 2050 presentation, the dollar doesn't buy as much anymore.
So I'd ask, I just think from me and for this committee is if the possibilities, and not now because again, I know it's off the top of your head and you didn't have it planned, but to think about submitting some ideas to us to help. You fit in this conversation. You're a big tool for this conversation, and we need to make sure that we help make this happen even better, right? And I'd ask that you can consider sending stuff for us to take a look at.
Yeah, and our team has discussed that, and I've talked with staff about that as well, and certainly want to be helpful where we can be. The infrastructure bank, what I've learned over the past 18 months as serving as the COO, it is a catalyst for these counties, municipalities, cities to assist in their funding for major infrastructure projects that are needed. And it's a really interesting agency. I attended a SIB forum back in May down in Texas, and we are really a model for as you mentioned, this South Carolina model is a model for the country. They were very interested in what we do here and how we do it. So I think that we can certainly be a part of this equation. As Secretary Powell has mentioned, he came on about a month or so before I did, and we have had a great working relationship and continue to. They're our partner agency along with DMV, and we look forward to moving forward with them.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Nope. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Powers.
Madam Chairman, thank you.
Sorry, Charles, I almost got you out of there.
Yeah, almost. I'm fairly new here, so I don't know as much as Representative Brewer, but he mentioned that originally the SIB was set up for large projects.
That's correct.
But I don't remember whether he said we need to allow them to do smaller projects. Is there a statute that says you can only do large projects, or are there some changes that need to be done to allow you to do more, I guess?
So there was a statute that, and initially the infrastructure bank was created for projects that were $100 million and above, and that was in 1997. That has been, I can't remember what the act was, but several years ago they dropped that to $25 million to be able to do more projects. And so the threshold now is set at $25 million.
To me, I would think that it needs to be more for the bigger projects. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Anything else?
Any further questions? Run, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you. All right, gentlemen, you're at the point where we need to discuss, just ask any questions of us or staff on any information you may need and how we can help you move forward on your discussion on your topic today. Comments, Q&A, Mr. Brewer.
Just one thing I think we want to drive home, right? So we had 30 years from 1986 to 2016 of the same funding. In 2020 to 2025, we've had the largest growth period in South Carolina's history. So we're trying that in 2017, when we finally passed the motor user fuel fee, good gracious, that's a lot to say, that money was to help what's there right now. That was not to increase capacity. That was not to do anything other than to help maintain what we have today. And we find ourselves with more people than we've ever had. We have to get creative, and we have to think outside of the box to give them the tools to deliver what we're being asked on. I know everybody in this group worked their behinds off when they campaigned, and you went around and knocked. If y'all were like me, and I know y'all were, you knocked on 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 doors. And every door I knocked on, the very first thing they would say was, I'm tired of sitting in traffic. I want to get home to my family. I don't want a 2-hour commute that used to be 30 minutes. So we have to look at some of these things, and we have to understand that money is a big part of it, but we can get creative with how we find some of this money. And I meant it. I hope they ask for every nickel in our budget, and we tell them no for the stuff that they can't get, because I think that the people of South Carolina are asking for it. We have not had a major highway expenditure, expansion, overhaul of our nation since the 50s when we did the interstate program. And now we're at that lifespan's up. So we've got to do our interstates, we've got to do our primary roads, we've got to do our natural resource areas that Representative Robbins brought up. You know, we've got areas that are in rural areas that are sand mines, that roads are getting destroyed, but we need that sand to build the roads. But in turn, our trucks are destroying the roads that they drive on. And the DOT's having to maneuver to go fix roads they never thought they would have to fix out in the middle of nowhere. So we have to look at this, and we have to look at this, and I'm telling you, the P3 conversation, I know Representative Stavronakis and I sat through some presentations on it, and it's different, it's new, it adds the choice lanes in areas that will work, and it provides funding to our state. It's something that we need to consider. We have to look at this stuff from the future, because that $7 billion project that Representative Chapman mentioned, that $7 billion would go a long ways elsewhere. I get that. But that $7 billion project, if we ignore it today, becomes a $9 billion project tomorrow. So it's not going to change. The need will never change. Just the price tag will go up. So we have to figure out that, and that's what this committee's charged with doing, and I appreciate the leadership of y'all willing to have these conversations and bring this in front of us, because this is something that we need to do, and I think we need to sit down and have some hard talks with our DOT and what they need and what they want and what we're willing to stomach, because I tell you, the public is ready to get out of traffic, and y'all all know that, and I think we need to look at all these things.
Mr. Stavronakis.
So, yes, I would double down on this point about that the previous increase was not for new capacity. And we have to acknowledge that is a serious limitation for DOT in our state in terms of meeting all this increased need we have in various parts of the state. The, project, got referenced a couple of times about that price tag, and I would just tell everyone that this is something I had to come to grips with. That's a huge number, but any major project, and you can ask the secretary, any major project in the state or in any state right now is a $1 billion project. I mean, it just is. And so we got to come to grips with that reality, so that anywhere we want to build a major project, obviously that one's exacerbated, as he described, by all the bridge work and elevated roadway, but any major project is in that price range now. And of course, we see that this is just continuing to spiral up. So the idea that, tweaking around the edges is going to get us, or get them, the tools they need to meet these needs now and in the future, honestly is not. Someone else is going to be back here in a couple of years, with an even worse situation if that's the route that we choose. So I think we need to talk about money. We need to talk about innovative ideas. We need to talk about, again, things that other states are doing, some of which Mr. Brewer mentioned. They're allowing them to do, especially some of these expensive projects, with other people's money. I mean, it's what's happening. And that not only gets the project done, a needed project that might not otherwise happen, but it frees up, as you mentioned, money to go meet other needs, more manageable needs. And that is invaluable, I would suggest. It would be invaluable to the agency and to our state moving forward. So I think all of these kinds of new procurement things and a discussion about what we're going to do to fund this agency properly moving forward are major conversations that are challenges. There'll be some criticism, but we got to meet this moment, and that's just what I would offer to everyone.
Mr. Garvin.
Thank you, Madam Chairs. And, I really want to echo a lot of what we've heard already. I think everybody probably on this committee agrees that failure is not an option. And I think everyone would also agree that not addressing this issue, that can't be an option either. As I mentioned earlier, we have seen what deferred maintenance looks like, right? And it's not, I don't know the rationale behind why we didn't address this issue sooner. But if we don't fix the issue now, then truly we're going to be here at this table, or somebody's going to be at this table 25 years from now talking about the same problem. So many of you all probably know the new Scout Motors plant is actually in my house district, and I've been amazed at how quickly that project had, well, not just the project itself, but the road work by DOT. So I want to just give DOT another shout out for the quickness and the speed and the quality of work that's being done on that project. But what that has shown me is what's possible, right? It has shown me what we can do when we have the willpower to make something happen. I think that this moment requires that we are innovative. I think it requires that we think outside the box. I think it requires that we really are willing to make the kind of investment that's required to improve the quality of our roadway. It was mentioned earlier that we can't pave our way out of this issue, and I think that's the truth of the matter. And it's going to take us working with DOT to find a solution to this problem. So I'm excited about the possibilities. When I saw that I was named as part of the Future Committee, I thought that it was a fitting place because I hope to, as many of you all hope to continue to impact what happens here in South Carolina for a long time to come. So looking forward to continued dialogue. And thank you all for your continued hard work on this effort.
Thank you, Mr. Garvin. Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. I don't want to get too bogged down in a lecture of money, but I'm looking and I'm listening to a lot of the dollars that we're throwing around. Just our state budget, our income tax, we bring in around $6 billion. So you're talking about all of our income tax could be used on one project. I think our total state, not counting federal dollars, around $14 billion. Being on Ways and Means, you know these numbers better than I do. But you can't widen the roads enough. You probably don't have enough money to do all that we need to do. So the things you're talking about, Representative Brewer, with getting out of the box, with other ways of getting money in, I mean, those are part of what trying to bring it into this future committee, but I think it's going to take the people are coming. We're not stopping that. The money is limited. It's going to grow because we have more people coming in, but as you knock on those 5,000-6,000 doors and you talk to the people, they want us to spend our money efficiently. And most people, and then I put myself in that category, don't understand $1 billion. Or, we throw numbers 200 million and 300 million. Those are dollars that most people don't deal with. And so they're big numbers, and they're hard to really put into focus. So I think the thing in our future is truly going to be, it's like talking about the internet in the 90s. Oh, you've seen those computers, what they could do, that World Wide Web. Well, now it's AI. Everything, you're not stopping AI either. So we got to be able to, efficiently use dollars to take AI. Maybe it's in these AI cameras. Maybe it is in, it's all about the congestion. I think ultimately bogs down to the lightings, the timing, how many. But sometimes you're just so many people in one area, and I sit there in a light and it turns green. I think we've all been there. It turns green. You see it turn green. You sit there for maybe a minute, and then you see it turn red, and then you start moving. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out, how does that work? Well, if you got 20, 30 cars in front of you, and it takes everybody 2 to 5 seconds to put their phone down, which we've passed that law, which hopefully that won't be happening anymore. But 2 to 5 seconds times 25 people, that's a lot of time. It doesn't take long to eat up a minute. So anyhow, I digress. I think the future is money. It's AI. It's technology. It's going to be getting out of the box. So you can't widen the roads enough. You can't spend enough, but you can efficiently use your money towards the technology we have available. So that was the only point I wanted to make.
Thank you, Mr. Strong. Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to go back. I guess it's the architect side of me. I focus on the bridges because, especially in the upstate, we have a lot of wooden bridges. There's concrete bridges. We talked about different types of bridges, but I feel like my understanding is we have 8,000 bridges that the state maintains. I think understanding exactly what we have and where we have the types of bridges is going to be a key component to understanding how much and the need. Is the bridge going to last 10 more years, or is it going to last 15 more years, so that 10-year bridge may have a more priority, or ranking system that pushes it up a little bit faster versus maybe a bridge that doesn't get traveled as much but can maintain longer. I just think the bridge component, because the road does us no good if the bridge goes down. I mean, we've all learned that, and I understand there's other ways around those areas, but certain roads, especially in the upstate, and especially in the area I serve, we're surrounded by a lake. I mean, I have several places that I can go to by boat. It takes me 7 minutes to get there by boat, but it takes me 35 minutes to get there by road, and then I probably cross a dozen bridges just to get to that one location. So I think we got to really focus on the need of our bridges. And I know that I've brought up the project about $7 billion. Just that kind of shocked me. I mean, I agree that numbers are increasing tremendously across the board on all projects. And then certainly bridges cost even more for a lot of our projects, especially, if we're having to widen them because it's basically a new bridge. I think the one on the Interstate 85 where we have at Liberty Highway, the traffic backs out into the interstate, and when I go home or go to my office, I bypass that because I'm not going to stay out in the interstate with trucks and everything else coming in behind me. So that's a failing intersection. They've determined it's a failing intersection. It has an F rating, but it's $75 million is what the estimate was to replace that bridge. But I think that's got to be in the forefront of our thoughts moving forward, because it's a declining, they're basically aging out across the board. But and then the second point I want to make is I agree with Rep. Robbins is the changing in traveled miles. I understand that's an old system about how we categorize, so we try to spread it across the entire state of how we allocate money. But it's this graph, I think, tells a big story, is that we know which ones have the biggest need based on the dark red, the red, and the orange. And then the green and yellows have a little less issues. I understand Rep. Brewer's point that we've got to get goods and services through some of those areas to build the bridges, but I think we've got to somehow categorize ways of allocating a stronger amount of the money towards the areas that are dark red, red, and orange moving forward. I mean, I think the old system worked fine. I think Rep. Garvin had mentioned, I don't know how we got to where we are, but I've always heard the adage or the statement that we're in the position we were in because for 30 years we bragged that we were the cheapest gas tax in the United States. So all we could do is fill potholes. And then fortunately that changed in 2017. We've got the money now, so we've got to figure out a way to move it forward. Unfortunately, since we've been collecting that money, the cost of services has gone up and doubled in most cases, sometimes even tripled in some. So, lastly, I think I've joked that the logo of this committee needs to almost be dollar signs, because every meeting we went to, every meeting we had across the state, everyone, whether it was bike paths or whether it was transportation, public transportation, everybody wanted more money so they could feel like they could help the cause of improving our system. So, I mean, but I strongly believe we've got to look at this one graph that shows where our strong needs are for financially. So that's pretty much it.
What else? Mr. Brewer, again?
I was just going to, again, I think you hit the nail on the head, Representative Vaughn. I mean, efficient money and efficient spending is the goal, right? It's not just the money, but it's the procurement methods that they had brought up as well, too. Putting the phase design build in there that'll allow us to get through, having the NEPA process, controlling our destiny on that, cutting time off. If we save a year is God knows how much in money per project, right? I mean, that's a ton of money that you can save. We had one project that drowned for 14 years, that went from a $50 million project to a $105 million project. So it's cutting that time out. That's money gained as well, too. So that's that's a funding source as well, not just throwing dollars at it, but cutting all the red tape that we have. And the AI that you had mentioned, I think is key in some places, but also making sure that you humanize it some and understand that just because on paper it may look like it's something that we can make better, we need to make sure that it actually does make it better, and we're not losing something in the process, like a qualified contractor or something along the way. We're not cutting a regulation that we need, but let's get rid of some of those red tape barriers that we do have out there as well, too.
Anyone else? I think we've heard a lot of really good information today, and I really appreciate. I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, did you want to ask something or make a comment? I apologize.
If you don't mind,
No.
I know this is not my committee, so I'm not sure if I can be at the last one today or not. So I just wanted to say a few things now while I had a few minutes. I agree with everything that's been talked about today. I mean, this is obviously a major issue that we have to deal with, and we've all been elected. I mean, same thing when I was walking around knocking on, I think I knocked on 3,500 doors, not 6,000. But when I was knocking on those doors, the one biggest issue that I kept hearing from was congestion issues and the traffic issues. You know, when I grew up in Fort Mill, 30 years ago, Fort Mill 160, which is our main artery now into the interstates, that was a dirt road with a little bait and tackle shop on the corner, a little golf shop, and nobody would have thought Fort Mill would turn into what it is today. And so I think a lot of people have been surprised by the amount of growth that we've had, but this is now a challenge that we have to deal with, and our constituents are relying on us for that. And so a couple things I worked on over Thanksgiving. I won't tell you how much time I spent on it because I kind of nerded out over the break on it. But I think we have to look at Act 114. I agree with some of the things that Gary was talking about earlier and some of the things that Robbie had to talk about. I think you got to look at Act 114, how the mechanism and the formula is structured right now. I think you have to take into a serious account the number of cars actually on the roadway, not just the actual lane mileage. I think that's something that has to be considered. I also think that this is kind of an idea that I saw that some other states were using, but other states actually allow their different engineering districts or different districts of the state to use a standardized formula throughout the whole state, but within each district, you can adjust your formula based on the priorities within that district. And so if congestion is, I'm looking at the change in miles traveled, I mean, if congestion is an issue in Charleston or Dorchester, you allow them to change their formula and the scoring mechanisms within that specific district to focus on the main priorities that they have, and those formulas are reset on an annual basis based upon those MPOs, the CTCs, and from SCDOT's input. So I think that's something we could potentially look at. I mean, like a rural community may focus on safety or may focus on land use or conservation above just the congestion issues, which they may not have. So it allows each district to score it separately. And you can also, again, Fort Mill, for example, safety would be a big priority for us. Congestion's a major priority for us. And so I think we need to look at how we structure that formula and allow each engineering district to prioritize what's important to them and focus on the projects that matter most to them, not necessarily across the board in South Carolina, but having one set standardized formulas that takes all those things into consideration, I think will allow us to streamline our processes, but also help the districts and help the people in that area that actually really knows what their needs are. That's one thing. And I think also with that, you can focus on economic development. If you're in an area with economic development or transport issues, that could be a weighted score on there as well. Second thing, I said this in the first committee hearing when I was speaking to Secretary Powell. I went out of the country probably I think 2 months ago, and I was just blown away with their transit system of connecting different parts of the country. And I was blown away with the when I look at that we're spending, $2 million on transit or whatever the number was, just a small increase in the actual dollars for transit programs throughout our state. But I look and change in miles traveled, and there's literally a line of red all the way up from York County, Greenville, all the way down to Charleston. I just wonder what investments we could potentially make long-term in like high-speed rail systems or high-speed train systems, right? If I'm looking 25 years ahead, right now we've got Amazon delivering packages on a drone. Where are we actually going to be at 25 years from now? And when we talk about moving people from certain areas of the state to others for economic benefits, I mean, how can we get people off our roadways? I don't believe that just paving roads is going to fix the solution. I think we have to figure out how can we get large amounts of people across the state quickly and efficiently as possible. And I think using P3s, long-term public-private partnerships, with some private companies to potentially look at that, I think is something that we need to think about long term. Finally, when we talk about, potentially how we're going to fund these things, I just want us to make sure that we're not necessarily looking at just how we're going to fund these, but who are we taking care of? Because ultimately, my goal is to take care of my constituents and South Carolinians, right? I've lived here my whole life. I love this state. We've got so many people coming from out of town. And frankly, I think that those people moving in here should foot some of those costs. And so I think we need to look at other options. I mean, is it, when I was down at the freshman caucus a couple weeks ago with the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce, they said, we think y'all could increase the hospitality and tourism tax because the majority of that revenue is coming from people in other states. And so I think if we're going to look at creative solutions, is there a portion of that you could, so maybe some people don't want me to say that, sorry, but they were even supporting that. They were like, this is something we could do, and we don't think that's going to slow down tourism at all in our districts. And so I think looking at creative solutions around hospitality and tourism tax, I think even looking at impact fees for new residents coming in from other states. So if you have to renew your driver's license for the first time, charging a little bit more of a fee for that whenever you have a brand new driver's license from out of state, right? Putting that burden back on the people coming here, not necessarily the people that have been here for a long time. So those are just a few things I would like to look into. And then also, even in the playing field with the gas tax, when we're charging EV cars and looking at EV credits and those things, I mean, I think EVs should pay their fair share. If we've got to go change all of our guardrails across the state of South Carolina because of the weighting, the way the weights of the EVs are now, I think ultimately they should foot the bill for some of that. So those are just a few things. Ultimately, I think Act 114 is the big thing that I would like to look into. We've got a lot of challenges ahead of us. Secretary Powell and his team have done a phenomenal job, and want to give applause to those guys for being here at all the meetings. And thank you all for letting me be a part of this. And to the Madam Chair, ladies, thank you all for having me on this committee. Thank you.
All right. For a little frame of reference, now this not just for the subcommittee, for the whole committee, all of us, 8 out of the 24 members actually were here on the last time we made major reform in 2017. So honestly, I'm going to tell you, when we took it up in 2017, I don't believe there were that many members who were there involved from the last time it was reformed. So the continuity of the folks who were here and understood the struggle. I mean, Mr. Hosey's one of them, and worked on this diligently for his area and across the state. So we have good continuity. We have the ability to be able to look back and look forward with this committee. And I believe that the committee members are specifically challenged with those types of things. So we have all of those things at our disposal. We have staff who have notes from all those things. Some of the staff was still here when we were working on that in 2017. So Emma was over in the Senate, but she was still here. The point being, we've got opportunities, and what I heard from your committee, I made copious notes as much as I could, but your committee is very important because you're kind of the lens of what we look at with the other two pieces that we're discussing in our subcommittees. And yes, we've got to work smarter, not make them work harder. And I think we can make some really good tweaks to what we have before to make those options available. I really appreciate the dialogue about how we get there and the give and the take. My Charleston folks, they really understand that, but I'm going to tell you, Mr. Martin, the red line goes all the way down to Beaufort County. Even Jasper's in that area now as well. So if it's coast, it's covered. And we do have specific needs. When the upstate has a bridge problem due to ice, the low country has a bridge problem because storms wash away the substrate of our roads and cause all kind of flooding and water damage and even wind damage. And then let's talk about the logging trucks that come through to pick up all of the debris from any of those storms, because trucks are necessary and important to our economy, but they're also really hard on our roads. Those types of things are South Carolina. We love our mountains to the sea, and I mean that 100% because I'm invested across the entire state, but it's also the reality of the issues that come with that diversity. And it's very important to remember the farmers and our food to table. It's very important to remember our ports. And while Jasper doesn't have a port, we sure wish we did. While Myrtle Beach wants an interstate, Jasper and Low Country, we'd like a port. But that's another discussion for another day. Maybe Christmas presents. There you go, yeah. The idea being here that your input after you leave here, I think, is going to be most important to this committee. You made great comments here, but I want you to digest everything you've thought of and maybe hone in on 3 things that really rise to the top for you on what those future needs really hit most resoundingly, so that we can boil down where we need to start focusing. That would be my challenge for you. I know 3's tough, and I expect some of you will laugh at me and say, Shannon, I'll send you 5. And I'm fine with that too. But the point is, the staff needs to know where our priorities lie, and you're the key to that. And you've done the homework and the focus on it, and Representative Crawford and I tried really hard to make sure our subcommittees were formed with the people who had experience, knowledge, and diversity on this scenario. So that's your charge. Representative Crawford, do you have anything to add or jump in here and tell them to do more?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I would just say if you have specific language, ideas, your top 3 or your priorities, what have you, have that to Emma and Mills by the end of the week so that they can start putting together the concepts and get some stuff to us next week, because these folks are going to take all of our ideas. That's why we're saying specific language that you have that you want to be considered, and going to have to put it into a bill format so that we can all start reviewing it and see what this final product's going to look like. So please get them any specific language, ideas, concerns, and so we can start working to get that because it's just a few weeks away and we'll be back in session, and we need to start getting that together and what that bill looks like. But again, I'll just echo thank you to all of you for traveling around the state. Thank you for your work on this, and we're not done yet, but we're getting closer. Again, thank you to Secretary Powell and his team. Thank you to Charles Cannon for being here today, and just all the stakeholders and everybody that has followed us around the state for many months and all of your hard work. Again, we're not done yet. But, we certainly we've done a lot of research, we've done a lot of listening, and now we need your feedback. So please be sure, get that information to Emma and Mills by the end of the week so we can start preparing some legislation to see what this is going to look like.
Absolutely. So in your notebook, right behind the agenda for today, you will find summary of our ACECSC report. You've got the South Carolina report, and then you have your county's information. That's leaning in a little bit more toward the Revenue Committee, which is going to be this afternoon. But because you're on the future needs, those things really play in to this particular information as well. So, and they will be online, as will the entire report, so that you can look at the whole report in case you need to have further information on any of these details. We'll actually have them, we'll have this information presented this afternoon. You can be here in person, or you can watch the live stream so that you can hear the report firsthand. Any other comments from the committee? Let's thank Emma and Mills for all their work. They have really, really done a lot. And yes, we said send your stuff in by Friday because let's try to not make them work on the holiday. They'd like to have Christmas. Yeah. All right. I hear no other suggestions, comments, or information. We will adjourn this meeting and reconvene this afternoon. What time? 1 o'clock. See you soon.